What is up, Kyler from FTN Daily, back again with the PrizePicks Prop Show Week 9, bringing you 5 of my favorite plays over at PrizePicks on the NFL streets. Got 5 for you. Last week, 3 for 5, not ideal. That was our worst week of the season. So definitely looking to bounce back there. And like I mentioned, we were kind of on a streak of 4 out of 5s, and last week was our first 3 out of 5 on the year. So I guess a little bit of silver lining there is, our worst week, and that was our only 3 out of 5. So looking to improve on that one. So let's get into the picks. But before we do, if you're a new user at PrizePicks, head over there, use code FTN, get yourself a 100% match up $200, get that bankroll started. And let me know who you are taking over on PrizePicks. Who's some of your favorite props to play this week? Let me know in the comments below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, helps us out a ton, and it'll help you stay up to date on all of our prize picks and other content coming to the YouTube channel. But now let's get into the picks. First pick, we're going to a kind of a division, I guess you can call a rivalry. I guess for some, they wish it was a rivalry. For this year, it might be more of a rivalry than expected, but Green Bay at Detroit here. They're in the Dome over there in Ford Field, right around the corner for me, about a 20-minute drive from where I am, so maybe I can get a little bit of luck here on this one. But Aaron Jones over 65.5 rushing yards. It's becoming more kind of apparent that Aaron Jones is essentially the workhorse in this offense. I know coming into the year, a lot of people wanted and thought that we would see more of a split with A.J. Dillon, but that just hasn't been the case over the last few weeks, and even more so importantly is the production has been great for Aaron Jones. And I know that they're going to really heavily involve him in the passing game, but last week 143 yards on the ground in a tough matchup against Buffalo too. This matchup is much easier. Detroit's defense has been bad against the run. A little bit worried that they can just get it done through the pass, but I do think this could actually be a spot where Green Bay is winning and controlling a game. So I do think that this number is too low in this scenario. So Aaron Jones over 65.5 rushing yards. Pick number 2, going to keep going back to this rookie. I mean, here at FTN, I feel like whether it's on PrizePicks or the FTN bet side of things, we have just been hammering Kenneth Walker's over on his rushing prop. It didn't work out last week, but for 3 straight weeks prior to that, it was successful. 88 plus yards in 3 out of his last 4 up until last week, which was a tough matchup against the Giants and also kind of a weird game script. It was just a very slow game that didn't really, we saw, I think, 3 muffed punts. That's obviously going to lead to extremely short field one way or the other. So just a weird game in general. 72.5 is the line here. So we're going Kenneth Walker over 72.5 rushing yards. Matchup against Arizona. I do think that there's a chance that they fall behind in this one, but the way that they've been using Kenneth Walker is pretty significant. I think they're going to continue to use him on the ground pretty heavily, despite the game script. And in this one here, I do think Kenneth Walker has some success. My model has him upwards of 90, I think 89.5 rushing yards. So Kenneth Walker over 72.5 is the play, like I mentioned, over this number in 3 of his last 4. And he's done it pretty easily. And this is a guy who he's broken off some big runs. I think he has 2 rushes, either at or above, right around 72 plus yards. He both obviously went for touchdowns, very long carries. Not to say that that's going to happen, but that explosive ability that he does have out of the backfield always puts you in play no matter what the line is here for Kenneth Walker. 72.5, we're taking the over there. Pick number 3, Josh Jacobs. So 3 straight running back plays, and this play I absolutely love. We obviously saw Josh Jacobs kind of go on a little bit of a tear in his own right. I think it was 3 straight weeks of 30 plus fantasy points, 3 straight weeks of 143 plus rushing yards prior to last week. What the Raiders were doing last week, I could not tell you. If you're looking for answers, this is not the place to be. I don't know if you can find somewhere who has the answers on what the Raiders were doing offensively last week, but like I mentioned prior to last week, 3 straight games, 140 plus yards. That is massive production, and I do think that if the Raiders have any common sense at all, which is sometimes a little bit of a Hail Mary in this sort of ordeal, when you're kind of hoping that the coaches or the management, whatever you want to call it, gets a little bit of a sense knocked into them here, but 43 rushing yards for Josh Jacobs, and they absolutely look terrible. They don't score a point offensively. You look at their offense the last 3 weeks prior to that game, best they've looked all year long. This team should be propelled by the run game. Not to say that you need to ignore Devontae Adams on the outside, but this Raiders team should really be using Josh Jacobs to set up the pass in this offense. So I think they do that here. I think they lead. I think they actually win this game, and it's going to help Josh Jacobs. I think regardless, they're going to make it a point. Whether they're down 14-0 in the first quarter, I think they're going to use Josh Jacobs heavily after what we saw from Derek Carr last week. I think Jacobs is the guy there in Vegas, and I think he goes over this number easily. My model has him right around 100 yards, has him as the second highest rusher on the week behind the one and only Derrick Henry. Hard to put anybody above him there, but that's just kind of the praise and the context that we're giving here for Josh Jacobs, especially in a matchup where I do think they are going to be in control of this one. So Josh Jacobs over 77.5 is the play there. Now to round it out, let's get away from the running backs. Let's go to wide receiver, a guy we bet pretty heavily last week. Took his over on his receptions and his receiving yards. And he cashed the receiving yards on his first catch of the day. I think it was in the first quarter, a 55, 56 yard, whatever it was. It was 50-plus yard reception for Garrett Wilson there. His line comes in here, 46.5. Yes, the matchup is brutal, no doubt about that, but the volume should be undeniable here for Garrett Wilson. And like we saw last week, that one play ability to go out and grab a 40, 50-yard catch, again, don't want to count on that, but that explosive ability, if he gets one or two catches for 20-plus yards, you're looking really good at this line, even in a tough matchup. Corey Davis has not practiced so far this week. I'm expecting he sits again in this one. Now, if you wanted to wait on this line, maybe wait out and see if Corey Davis plays or not, feel free, but I don't think he's going to play. And honestly, I think the model would probably like him regardless. So Corey Davis over 47.5. Elijah Moore continues to be uninvolved. He had one target last week. I think last week was the scary spot for Garrett Wilson, where you could say, okay, maybe they're going to really try to get that wheel, get those gears turning for Elijah Moore. Like I mentioned, one target. I think he's essentially just being phased out of the offense. This team isn't really throwing a whole lot anyway, but when they do, they are looking Garrett Wilson or Tyler Conklin's way. Now, again, I think Elijah Moore can work his way back into the offense, but for now, it's clear Garrett Wilson is the wide receiver one there, so over 46.5. They should have to throw a lot. They're 14.5 point underdogs, so Wilson over 46.5 receiving yards. Now, let's go to a guy who had an amazing game last week, Terry McLaurin, over 63.5 receiving yards. This line over on some books is 67.5, so a nice little edge there. Nice little value for Terry McLaurin, who just topped 110 yards last week. He had a big chunk play at the end of the game there with that amazing grab to seal the deal in Indy against the Colts, pulling off that upset. But 3 of his last 4 games, Terry McLaurin has gone over 73 receiving yards. He's had 8+ targets in each of the last 2 games with Taylor Heineke under center. That chemistry is clearly still there from last year, and I think rightfully so. I mean, McLaurin is by far not only their best receiver, but by far their best player. It was shocking to see him kind of be less involved throughout the first 5-6 weeks, and even when Curtis Samuel is getting more looks than Terry McLaurin, it does seem a little bit strange. I think that changes. I think that continues to trend in a good direction for Terry McLaurin. This is a matchup that DeAndre Hopkins just had a field day on last week. Now, Terry McLaurin is not DeAndre Hopkins, and Kyler Murray is a little bit better than Taylor Heineke. I'll give him credit there, but still a good matchup. 21st in pass DVOA against obviously opposing passing offenses. This Vikings secondary is, so I'm liking this line, Terry McLaurin over 63.5 receiving yards on the day. So that's going to be it for the 5 picks. Again, let me know who are your favorite picks down below in the comment section. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, helps us out a ton. And again, if you are a new user at PrizePicks, use that code FTN, get yourself a 100% match up to $100. Great way to make a free $100. So let's talk about these picks just to recap real quick. Aaron Jones over 65.5 rushing yards. Kenneth Walker over 72.5 rushing yards. Josh Jacobs over 77.5 rushing yards. Garrett Wilson over 46.5 receiving yards. And finally, Terry McLaurin over 63.5 receiving yards. So that's going to do it for us. We will see you guys next week. Here's to a 5 for 5. As always, good luck, everybody.